Hello everyone. Welcome to week 4 of the series God's Mission, the Unfolding Plan of Redemption. In this week's lesson, we're going to be looking at Genesis chapter 12 and covering the story of Abraham. Now in this lesson, we are attempting to answer the big question, how do Abraham's blessings point to Jesus? Now in the first part, we explored our first supporting question that asked, what was promised to Abraham and why was this so valuable? We were able to conclude that Abraham was promised land, offspring, and blessing. These three promises would offer Abraham security, power, and influence for God's glory among the nations. Now in this first part, we saw these three promises have a very practical component for the physical aspects of God's promise to be fulfilled. Now in the second part, we will begin to explore a deeper meaning behind these three promises and how they relate to God's promise to redeem the world. Now to help us do that, we're going to ask this second supporting question, and the question reads, how did God's promise to Abraham, all three parts, point to God's plan of redemption in Genesis 3:15 and ultimately to God's glory? Now of these three promises, the culmination of God's plan for Abraham rests in the final promise of blessing to all the nations of the earth. Now the end of verse 3 says that all the families of the earth will be blessed through Abraham. So please try to take a moment to answer this next question here. And the question reads like this. In Galatians 3:13 through 18, or take some time to read that, Galatians 3:13 through 18, and then answer this question. What could possibly be a blessing through Abraham to every single person on this earth, and why? Take a few moments and record a response to this question. God's promise to provide a blessing to all the families of the earth refers to the coming Redeemer, Jesus. Jesus, literally being of the seed of Abraham and a direct descendant of his nation, would one day bring salvation to both the nation of Israel, Abraham's descendants, and all the other nations of the earth, the Gentiles, blessing the world by redeeming mankind of the curse of sin and death. As we move on, let's think about this question. How would the promised land and offspring serve the greater purpose in God's plan to redeem the world? Take a moment and answer that question. Now God's third promise to Abraham to bless all the families of the earth, and we see in Galatians how that is connected to Jesus and the Redeemer by providing that salvation to the world. That's an obvious point that we can conclude from these promises, but if you look at even at the first two parts, I think we can even begin to see some spiritual components to that. And so to help answer this question, a large nation and the land needed for this nation was necessary to make God known and preserve the lineage of the seed of the woman to bring forth Jesus. Now, in those three promises, as you look at the spiritual component, you can see how God is moving and working throughout history to fulfill his promises that he made in the garden. And so with that, I think we have enough information to go back and answer our supporting question number 2. The question reads like this. How did God's promise to Abraham, all three parts, land, offspring, and blessing, how did those all point to God's plan of redemption in Genesis 3:15 and ultimately to God's glory? Take some time and formulate a response to this question. As we've seen before, in Genesis 3:15, God reveals his ultimate mission to redeem mankind from the curse of sin by providing a Savior through the seed of the woman. God worked through Abraham, the direct descendants of this promised offspring, to establish a family. God then chose to bless this family in order to create a nation, thus preserving a godly lineage to usher in the Savior Jesus Christ, who would redeem his people from the curse of sin and death. Therefore, God needs a specific group of people growing and becoming stronger in order to fulfill this task. God specifically chooses Abraham and his family to build this plan through. So God's mission of redemption will come through this chosen group of people, Eve's offspring, who offers hope and salvation to every person who believes. Now this concludes the second part of our week 4 video lesson. Please continue to work through the final video before our next meeting together. May the grace of God be with you.